Good morning, everybody, and good Shabbos, Hag Sameach. It's great to see everybody, to see so many of you as we celebrate the Shabbat and the Chag. Get ready for Yizkor, of course, in just a little bit. Oh, you already did it? You guys are way ahead. I'm impressed. We're still in the Torah reading. So the Greenfield Chapel, as all of you know, has been a crucial part, an integral part of Congregation Beth Yeshurun since the merger of 1946. In 2006, Rabbi Danny Horwitz was hired to serve as the part-time rabbi of the Greenfield Chapel. This hire, as you know, would forever change our chapel and our entire Beth Yeshurun community for the better, because Rabbi Danny Horwitz wasn't your typical rabbi. First, he came with a lot of pulpit experience and a unique and special connection to our congregation. He had already served as a rabbi of Congregation Beth Jacob in Galveston from 1980 to 1986, and Congregation Ohev Shalom in Prairie Village, Kansas, part of the metropolitan Kansas City area, from 1986 to 2004. He was born and grew up in Oklahoma City, and while a student here in Houston at Rice University, he attended the Shabbat services at the Greenfield Chapel. He's also married to Toby Cooper, the daughter of longtime Beth Yeshurun members Leon and Shirley Cooper. May Leon continue to rest in peace. Secondly, Rabbi Horwitz is a world-class scholar. He received his Doctor of Jewish Studies in 2013 from the Spiritus Institute of Jewish Learning and Leadership in Chicago. And he's known throughout many parts of the Jewish world. His book, A Kabbalah and Jewish Mysticism Reader, is an unprecedented, annotated anthology of the most important Jewish mystical works. His work has made the basic concepts of Jewish mysticism accessible to a wide audience. And if you haven't read the book, I encourage you to do so. His learning, his talent, his skills have also allowed him to serve as our congregational Torah reader, and he teaches adult classes in our Jewish Learning Project and at evening chapel services. As learned as he is, he's been truly able to relate and work with people of all ages. I have had the honor of seeing it many times, whether it was teaching our bar mitzvah mother this morning how to read Torah, which he just did beautifully in our Baruch Sanctuary, working with 13-year-olds, or working with 80-year-old men. No matter the person, Rabbi Horwitz finds a way to make sure that they are fully prepared, and to make sure that they've learned Torah, to make sure that they're at a point where they can go up in front of a congregation such as ours and do an efficient job. He's able to relate to congregants of all ages, and I love hearing from our congregants often how blessed and fortunate they felt that their son or daughter got to learn from someone like Rabbi Horwitz. As you have heard, we've been very blessed to have him serve as the rabbi at the Greenfield Chapel, because he's never been your typical rabbi. And Rabbi Horwitz and his wife Toby are blessed with 4 children, 2 granddaughters and 1 grandson. And he's now at the stage in his life where he's ready to take a little bit of a break and retire as the rabbi of our beloved chapel. However, we are fortunate that he will continue as our congregational Torah reader and as a popular teacher for our JLP program and here in the chapel, and as an advisor of Jewish law and practical rabbinics for me, my colleagues, and all of us at Congregation Beth Yeshurun. Before I finish, I want to thank Danny personally for all that he has done for our community. Thanks to you, Danny, you didn't just fulfill the basic requirements of your position when you were hired in 2006. You were hired to give sermons. You were hired to do some teaching in the chapel, to be your chapel rabbi. But that wasn't enough. That's not who you are. You wanted to give more because of your passion and commitment to Jewish life and to the members of this chapel community. You brought new programs to life. To name just a few, the Millionaire of the Year program, Kol Rina, Haftarah Drosh volunteers, monthly articles for the message, and organizing assignments for weekly Yortzeit calls. You brought a spirit of innovation to our chapel that has left an indelible and lasting impact. You've also served as a model of commitment and passion for observant Jewish life. You reminded all of us as conservative Jews that we can take Shabbos seriously, and kashrut, the Hagim, davening, and whatever aspect of davening that may be. We all love listening to Danny, not just because of his beautiful voice, but because we know when he's davening and leading us in prayer, we know he's communicating with God. We can sense it, we can see it, we can almost feel it. It's because of his learning, it's because of his passion, it's because of who he is deep in his soul. And that passion is rubbed off on me, and I know so many of you in this community. Danny, you brought so many creative ideas to elevate our chapel community. Your immense knowledge of our tradition has been a guiding light for our daily minyan. And through your hard work and strong commitment to our chapel members, you brought the caring touch of an exceptional rabbi. And I know you are retiring as the chapel rabbi, but I know your presence will still be here. I know you'll still be our teacher, you'll still be our Torah reader, and we'll be blessed to have you as part of our Jewish lives for many years to come. Thank you to my friend, my rabbi, and one of my teachers. I know we all feel immense gratitude for all that you've given us. Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Horwitz, and Yeshur Koach on a job well done.
Thank you, Rabbi Strauss. I think he was maybe just softening me up to get a good bet on the OU Texas game today. Well, there's no point in betting on Oklahoma either. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Every year during the month of Elul, in addition to preparing sermons for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, I've tried to learn something new, and some years I have to admit it's been more aspirational and less something I actually did. But this year I took an online course on the book of Deuteronomy, taught in 8 half-hour sessions by Micah Goodman, one of the leading Jewish thinkers today. And if you're interested, you can email me about it. But today I want to share just a couple of insights that I learned from him. Deuteronomy, of course, is particularly relevant to us today for a number of reasons. First, we will finish the reading of this book and the entire Torah tomorrow morning on Simchat Torah. And second, the Haftarah for Shmini Atzeret is the prayer of Solomon, offered at the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem, which took place today on Shmini Atzeret. Deuteronomy has much to say about the temple and about the kings during the First Temple period. It was written long after the temple was built, so it contains some important lessons about the experience of our people under the monarchy. And third, as we reach the conclusion of the festival period, it's important that we be sure that we avoid any distortion of religion. And Micah Goodman points out that power misused can lead to a distortion of religion. Power misused can lead to making religion into magic. And he also notes that power misused can distort politics. It can lead to tyranny. Now, how does power do that? Well, we are all anxious about the future because we don't know the future. And sometimes someone comes along and tells us a story that says, you can control your destiny, you can control your future. You perform a ritual and it rains. You perform another ritual and you win a war. That kind of thinking can be very seductive because then you don't have to feel so anxious anymore. Rabbi Harold Kushner, in one of his books, tells a story of how he was supposed to perform a wedding in the backyard of one of his congregants, and it was looking like rain. And the mother of the bride is so worried that the day is going to be spoiled. And so what does she do? She puts a $20 bill into the pushkin. And half an hour later, it's still overcast and looks threatening. So she puts another 20 into the pushki. And a few minutes later, the sun comes out and the mom does her little victory dance. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah. Now, we can all agree that tzedakah is good and still regard this as a misuse, a flawed use of religion. And by the way, the other way some people deal with this kind of anxiety is to have someone else control everything. Rabbi, you should pray that the weather will change. You know, even when people say this as a joke, it's only partly a joke, right? So let me assure you that at Beth Yeshurun, only the senior rabbi has the power to change the weather. And of course, when you become emeritus, you pass on the power, correct? Yeah. So, just for a little while, we hope that someone else will take care of everything, as if we were little kids again. And so it's a big concern how easily politics turns into tyranny and how easily religion turns into magic. And this is a helpful way of understanding what is revolutionary about the book of Deuteronomy. It is about creating a religion that is not about magical control. A religion where God is beyond nature, where you cannot capture God. You have hints of this elsewhere in the Torah. Moses asks God his name, and God says, yeah, sure, yeah, I will be what I will be. You can't control me through a name. God is at Sinai, but the people can't see God. The book of Deuteronomy comes down hard on this in two ways. It brings about two revolutions, one for religion and one for politics. Number one, taking God out of the temple is a new kind of religion. And number two, taking absolute power away from the king is a new politics. And those are the two revolutions in Deuteronomy. The Torah is asking us to imagine something. Yes, God brings the Israelites out of Egypt. But the vision of Deuteronomy is for when they come into the land of Israel. They will build a temple, but God doesn't live there. The temple is a place to access a feeling of nearness to God, but God doesn't actually live there. They can perform rituals there, but the rituals don't give you an illusion of being in control. And yes, there is a king, but the king has limited power. It's a new kind of religion, a new kind of politics, and in both of these, the people have to step up and take more responsibility and not just depend on God or the king. This is how the Torah ends. Even though this vision was not implemented, at least not well, in the time of the first temple, doesn't mean it can't be. By the way, the prophet Jeremiah was also a big believer in this approach, that God doesn't live in the temple. But he says in chapter 7 of his book, if you behave yourselves, if you fix your actions, you can keep the temple. You will get to dwell there. God doesn't live at the temple any more than God lives at Beth Yeshurun. The Bible says there were false prophets who said that God dwells in the temple, and therefore you are guaranteed immunity. The Bible calls them false prophets. Today we would call it fake news. Jeremiah says, don't listen to the propaganda about the temple. It's fake news. You must protect those people who are not protected. It's not about rituals, it's about social sensitivity. Only if you have justice between people, if you don't take advantage of the immigrant, the orphan, and the widow, all these people who are not protected, if you don't shed innocent blood or follow false gods, then only will you deserve to remain in this place. Jeremiah says that the temple will be destroyed and you will be exiled not because you didn't take the temple seriously, but because you took it too seriously. Jeremiah is saying there's no magic about the temple. Good behavior brings good results, at least usually. Didn't work out that way for Jeremiah himself, of course. Well, unfortunately, people had a very hard time with that message. They were trapped in the myth that the temple magically protected them, that God lived in the temple, and that myth corrupted them. They didn't realize you could have rituals which could be meaningful, but they're not magical. There's nothing magic involved with saying a particular prayer in a particular way. I don't keep Shabbat because I think it will protect me or my family. I don't keep kosher because I think something bad will happen if I don't. I keep them because I believe God wants us to maintain a Jewish way, and that this way adds meaning to our lives. It's a more difficult sell than magic, but it's more honest. If we look at the Haftarah for Shmini Atzeret, the beautiful prayer of King Solomon, given at the final day of the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem, how does it fit into this picture? Solomon certainly prays that the people will never fail to keep the rules of the Torah, and that his subjects should always walk in God's ways. But then what does he do? He offers as sacrifices 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. That's quite a stockyards there. Imagine how much we would have to enlarge our campus to fit all those animals. Think of the kind of taxes the people had to pay to enable King Solomon to offer those sacrifices, not to mention all those who had to be hired to clean up after all those animals. But this was Solomon's grand style. Solomon, who taxed the people in order to raise the money to build the magnificent temple. Solomon, who virtually enslaved people to work on the building of the temple. Solomon, who took on many wives and built lavish houses for them in order to make alliances with the surrounding nations. The people put up with all this oppression, this overbuilding and overtaxation, because after all, this was Solomon, the son of David. Solomon, the wise and gifted king. But you know what happens after Solomon dies? 1 Kings chapter 12 tells us that when his son Rehoboam says, in effect, I'm going to keep up this grand style, I'm going to tax the people even more, he finds that what his father could get away with, he can't. And the northern tribes break off from those who remain loyal to him. Paradoxically, the king loses power by not being willing to give up some power. The people would no longer live with that kind of tyranny. And of course, both northern and southern tribes are weakened. Eventually, both of them are conquered. It's one of the great tragedies of Jewish history brought about by our own weaknesses. Deuteronomy, written with some knowledge of this history, seeks to place limits on the power of kings. The king must not do what Solomon did, to multiply possessions and take many wives. The king must show that he, more than the rest of the people, is bound by the laws of the Torah by keeping a scroll of the Torah with him at all times. In a way, it was a compromise with human nature. They wanted order, but they needed to avoid tyranny, so kings, but with limited power. The temple was there, but it also must not have too much power. It's not magical. And don't try to bring in 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. Because as the prophets all tell us, God is not impressed by that kind of excess. And you can't control God, no matter how many rituals you perform. The message of the prophets was that people were not working on the vision of Moses, the vision of this book that we will finish reading tomorrow. It's ironic and it's tragic. The people of the Bible didn't live up to the vision of the Bible. But too often the people and the kings forgot this vision. And sometimes we do too. The good news is that sometimes we have second chances. This is where I want to say a few words about Yizkor. 4 times a year we have this ritual where we are caused to think about our departed loved ones and to pray for them. For most of us, that means our parents. Some of us may think we disappointed them. Some of us may have unresolved issues with them. Most of us remember our parents with love, but I know very few people who have 0 issues with their parents. There is no magic in Yizkor. Yizkor doesn't overcome death. It doesn't resolve whatever problems we or our parents had. It doesn't protect our parents in the afterlife. It isn't something we can do for them. All it does is get us to reflect on what they meant to us. It is a structured way to re-encounter some of those who were among the most important people in our lives. Good, bad, and everything in between. We come back together with them. We ask God to remember them, but why should God remember them if we would not? We are the ones who have to remember. And that is meant to challenge us to be the people we are meant to be, not always the people our parents intended us to be, but the people that those around us and those in our community need for us to be. Not always the people our parents intended us to be, but the people that those around us and those in our community need us to be. And sometimes it helps us to reflect on the trials that our parents faced in order to be what we need to be. And even when they reflect our anxieties, there is no magic in our prayers and rituals. If you repeat the Amidah or you don't, if you do the full Torah reading or the triennial cycle, if you say every prayer in the book or not, you know what the rabbi said about that. Echad hamarbe v'echad hamamid. It's all the same if you do more or less. Uvilvad sheyechavein libo l'shamayim, as long as you direct your heart to heaven. Now, I didn't make that up, and I'm generally an advocate for the traditional Jewish path, but the key part is to direct your heart to heaven, to allow the prayers to enter you and not just to recite them. That's also part of the tradition. On this Yizkor Day, I want to take a moment to remember the elders of the chapel from whom we inherited its traditions. Many of them were born in Europe. Some of them were Holocaust survivors. And I have a special gratitude for those of them who took an interest in me. Some of them occasionally invited a young college student to Shabbat and Yontif meals, gave me insights into Torah and Jewish life. And in many cases, they were very deeply observant Jews. I'm not sure I would have gone into the rabbinate without their influence, and I hope my presence in the chapel has paid some of my debt to them. And because this is my last sermon, at least for the chapel community, for a while, I want to thank all of you who have listened to my sermons in the chapel over the past 15 years. I hope that I've stimulated you to rethink and to add to some of your Jewish commitments. I hope that I've not overtaxed you. In my last act as chapel rabbi, I'd like to announce that the next time you hear me speak from the pulpit will be on December 26th, on Millionaire Shabbat, when we will be honoring Del and Barbara Coleman as our Millionaires of the Year. We appreciate the commitment Del and Barbara have shown to the chapel over the years, and especially since the beginning of the pandemic. And I look forward to being able to be there to present them their award. And who knows, maybe we'll even be able to have a kiddush that day. That'd be nice. I'm very grateful for the extremely generous gift that you have given to me, which was announced by Arthur on Yom Kippur afternoon. I can't adequately express how much that means to me. And most of all, I am grateful for the many friends I have and have had in the Greenfield Chapel, and I pray that the chapel community will celebrate together, back in its special place at the right time, for many more years to come. And I am grateful to the chapel leadership, particularly to our co-chairs, Michael Lewis, Arthur Nathan, Dr. Bob Arcus, Dr. Stephen Tu, to Jack Usick, and to Richard Kammerman for the special role that they play as well. I'm sure that most of you know that I have resigned this position not just because, as Rabbi Strauss generously put it, because I need a break, but because of differences about the future direction of the chapel. But I want all of you to know that I truly appreciate your commitments to the Greenfield Chapel as well as your kindness to me. And I look forward to seeing you there in the future. Thank you. Thank you all. And may you remain in good health until we return to the chapel.